got the clicker.
All right.
IT's
Wait a minute.
What's that?
So I'm trying to do it from here and I can barely see
There's another
myself.
problem.
There we
If
go.
you lose it, you lose it.
Oh, again.
I don't know.
Should be full screen.
There we go. Mr.
I'm not going
Sadowski, it's all
to
you.
read the public comment procedure again. The same rules apply that you heard at 6:30. I have 2 people written down for public comment. Mrs. Herring, did you want to speak before?
Diane Herring, Hilltown Township. I hope you'll all work with me here. If you log into the Pennridge High School website and look at the parent page drop-down, I discovered something today, and it was actually due to Dr. Bolton's email.
So it's all your fault.
Thanks a lot, Dr. Bolton.
You're welcome.
He was kind enough to actually echo something I strongly believe in, which is that such success is also the result of strong family environment. And I have been finding it exceptionally difficult to navigate as a parent of a high schooler today and getting them ready to apply for college and getting out the door successfully. It has become harder and harder. If you go to the parent drop-down page of the Pennridge High School website and you look for the tab that says testing dates, I assumed that was the date that would be for SAT and ACTs. I clicked on that page and I got a very pretty multi-screen PDF. It involves PSSAs and keystones, and it's dated from 2015-16. And that was as of 3 hours ago. The reason I mention that is because we made another decision in the high school, what I'm finding to be one of the most effective bubble-wrapped buildings I've ever seen, where nobody communicates effectively. I got an email November 7th in line with that today was the end of the first marking period. And in an effort to share our marking period grades as quickly as possible, student grades will be accessible through Power Portal. We will not be printing report cards anymore. This got sent on November 7th, the last day of the marking period. I can't imagine the decision to do this was made on November 6th. Is there some reason why we can't communicate this in advance? Because if we had, we might have actually taken from parents, again, feedback, that in the decision to do this and vapor dust a paper trail of report card, you vapor dusted parent access to GPA. The only place a parent could tell what their kid's GPA was on their report card. It's available electronically through Naviance, a tool, however, that only a student is supposed to access. There's no parent portal for Naviance. So if you want that, you have to hack your kid's ID. So much for safe internet protocol. See where we're spiraling here? So, I have and been blessed with severely academically challenged children who are seeking and striving to excel. I brought that up because I can't tell what my junior son's current GPA is. And I'm trying to help him profile colleges. So I go to the guidance department. The guidance department offers me 3 options: harassment complaint, student assistant, and student crisis support. Where on there is academics? So I find out from my 11th grader, he actually had a sit down with his guidance counselor a week and a half ago. Guidance counselor wanted to know, with his academic track record, if he was going to take the ACT or the SAT. To which he responded, "I've already done both and have test scores. How do you not know that?" Mind you, this is a child you probably would want to know in your guidance department has taken the SAT and the ACT. The ACT, he has nearly a perfect score across all 4 categories. He scored perfect in 2 of the 4. His SAT is 40 points below a perfect score. His PSAT came in today, he's in the 1%. But I have a guidance counselor that doesn't even know he took the tests. And I'm bringing this up to curriculum because I can't help my kid. And you're telling me it's great that families are supposed to be involved. The last committee meeting, we didn't talk about parent involvement. And now we're in curriculum. And I got told today what a great job we did getting our AP scores up. I can't even find my child's GPA because a decision was made in a bubble with absolutely no input. It is so frustrating because these decisions come out of that high school every week. And the best part is, there are 2,000 parents out there right now who watched a Facebook post from a parent who said they stood here in the gymnasium on November 21st and had a conversation with the high school principal and several assistant principals, all of whom tried to log on to PowerSchool to address that parent saying, I can't see my kid's GPA. None of them could bring it up either. Oh, that's a problem. The best part is, we're 4 weeks in. I got told you cut off printing a report card, which for no reason other than we'd get the information quicker, which, by the way, took 14 days for grades to be posted electronically. And you knew 4 weeks ago that this was not working and this was a problem. And you know what? Not one transparent, proactive communication from that building to us to say, hey, we know we have a little glitch. We're working on it. How hard is that?
Is this not? Can I, for the Canvas, I don't use the, I'll admit I don't have my Canvas Observer account thing, but if one was to establish one of these Canvas Observer accounts and a parent login, could you see that information or not? I'm not.
Canvas is separate.
Canvas
Is it
is
separate?
It's not PowerSchool.
There are things
You're
you can
talking
see
about
on
Power
Canvas.
School.
PowerSchool,
Power
because that's where
School.
we were told to go get the grades.
Okay. Yeah, I actually do know how to sign on to my Power School though. Power School I do, but not Canvas. Okay, all right, thank you.
Mrs. Fairlawn's on.
And Mrs. Furlong.
Sue Furlong, West Rock Hill Township. We'll just deviate just 1 second from why I'm here to touch on what was just said. When my son went to high school, they had a parent meeting with the guidance department in the beginning of the 9th grade to tell us parents what it would take for our child to qualify for the most competitive schools on down. You don't wait until a child is an 11th grader and then start consulting with that child, because doors have already slammed shut if they didn't take this or that, but they aspired to do so and so. Or maybe mom and dad need to save, more money, or get a hook for that child. The example that they happened to use when they discussed it with my son, learn to play harp, because all of the orchestras on campuses need harpists. It's just an example, but it was in the 9th grade. It was in the evening so that all the parents could attend, because they cared about what happened to that kid after he left the high school. And they wanted their children to achieve, not find out in the middle of the 11th grade that they didn't take what they should have taken in the 9th or 10th grade or 11th grade. So it's really a deficit here. You know, it sounds to me like our guidance counselors are not focused on academics. Maybe I'm wrong, but that's how you do it. You begin at the 9th grade and you coach the parents and the students. Anyway, the reason I'm here. Item F. I'm sorry, item E. What is that topic about? Is that the PSSA scores?
Item E?
Yes,
It's the,
ma'am.
Yeah,
it's your school
achievement.
district
Okay,
achievement
it's the
assessment.
PSSA scores.
And the
Is there some reason
keystones
the word
and-
PSSA isn't there?
What is your comment,
Yeah.
Ms. Furlong? Because when
Well-
we get to that item, we'll address those. So what is your
Okay.
concern specific to
My
that?
concern is that when you discuss standardized test results, which are typically PSSA scores, except for the keystone, that you tell the public, especially the parents, we're discussing PSSA tonight, and that doesn't say PSSA. Unless you're a mind reader practically, the PSSA is not on this agenda. And I think that's not fair to the parents, and it's not fair to the students. You are hiding it. I don't know how we came in this year, good or bad, but if you're discussing PSSAs, stop hiding it from the parents. Say what you're doing.
Okay.
Ms.
Thank
Cohen,
you.
if I may, just one update from a previous meeting that addresses one of the public comments that was made tonight. I asked guidance to look into the Naviance Power School GPA model in terms of it being accessed, because as Ms. Herring said, that the GPA is available to the students through Naviance, but parents do not have access to Naviance unless, of course, they're using their student's account, as Ms. Herring said. The issue between Naviance and Power School is that they do show the same cumulative GPA, which is different than the report card GPA that Ms. Herring talks to, because the cumulative GPA is only finished grades. And so obviously at the end of the first marking period, that would have nothing to do with your cumulative GPA. So what was on the report card was a marking period GPA that just kind of show how you're doing, but it wouldn't update anything in Naviance nor in Power School. Power School does have the capability of doing that, although the wording is different from the wording in Naviance and is unclear. So we're in the process currently of speaking to the tech school, who is our Power School provider, from a tech standpoint, in terms of whether we are able to change that language, in which then we could flip the switch to Power School to allow it to be there. But currently it makes it look like your GPA, like right now, if we were to turn on the Power School GPA, it would say cumulative GPA quarter 2. Because we're in quarter 2, it has nothing to do with the GPA, it just has to do with where it resides. And so we have to decide whether we can change that or not, because the IU is just a consumer, they are not the designer of Power School. And if we cannot, we then will have to make the decision as to whether we flip that switch to solve one problem but create communication issues. Because obviously when you get to quarter 3, it'll say quarter 3. And so whether people will be confused by that or not. So currently the decision is made that until we're positive what Power School can or cannot do and how clear it can be, we know Naviance is accurate and Naviance clearly communicates to the children. So we are continuing to work on Power School, and we'll have an update as soon as we know from the IU what is possible from that standpoint.
Thank you.
Yep, you're welcome.
And I just want to comment about the guidance. It is something that we've had discussions about. Dr. Bolton and I just talked recently about not just starting in 9th grade, because even with certain things, like say military academies, you need to start that planning before 9th grade. You know, 9th grade is when it starts to count. Your grades start to count and all of those things. But you have to have certain things in place even in middle school. So we've had conversations, and I know I don't want to put words in Dr. Bolton's mouth if you want to say something else, but I know it's something that's important to the school board and my own judgment from my discussions with Dr. Bolton, that's important to him too. So it will be, you know, we're looking for improvements in that area. So.
And both of those topics are very clearly addressed in the comprehensive plan, as well as the guidance Act 339 plan that has not been finalized yet, but we have spoken about on a couple occasions. That is finalized by the end of the school year, which is a K-12 guidance plan. It addresses far more than guidance counselors, but guidance counselors is part of what it addresses. So there will continue to be updates about that Act 339 plan as we go through the year.
I like the idea about the parent meeting.
Help.
because it will help to give, a lot of times parents don't have the information. So, okay. Yeah, if there's any,
Just really quick.
I'm watching the
Jen
clock.
Glenn, Bennington, Hilltown. It's kind of based on what she was saying about the whole GPA thing. When I called to get a copy of my daughter's report card, because we wanted her GPA, because we're looking at colleges right now. She wants to be an engineer, we're looking at competitive colleges, I wanted to see where she fit in as far as where her GPA is. And the one thing that bothered me was, we only get their weighted GPA, we don't get their unweighted GPA. And I hate to tell you, these big colleges want their unweighted GPA and not their weighted GPAs. And we have no way to figure that out except for figuring it out ourselves, which means that we have to go back through 4 years of school and look at every marking period and figure it out ourselves. And there's a lot of things weighed in there because one, because they have a lab, this is worth this much, or it's a half a year, it's only worth this much. It's a lot to figure out as a parent. And there's no directions on how to do it. You just use your common sense and your, and when I called and asked the guidance department about it, the answer that I got was bothersome. Who told you that? And I go, I've talked to a few colleges and big colleges, and I know people that are looking at big colleges that want their unweighted GPA. And right, you're one of them too. I have, and the guidance department cannot help them when asked. I have a friend who spent 4 hours trying to figure out her son's unweighted GPA to get into a honors program at Temple, and had to sit there for 4 hours and figure it out. He had to go through every single report card and figure it out. So that was a little bothersome that we're not giving those things to the parents, because that is something that these kids, especially that are looking at colleges, really need. And the reason being is, I'll give you an example. Again, I work at different schools. B. Reed Henderson, do you know what they get for an A in an AP class? A 5.5. What do we get? A 4.8. So how can you compare? That's why colleges don't look at weighted GPAs, because every school has a different scoring. There's no standard in the state, in our state, or in anywhere, there's no standard for an AP honors or an academic class. So that was frustrating for me, because I don't know what my daughter's unweighted GPA is. So throwing that out there too, that could be something that we could put into the system too, where we can see both cumulative, unweighted and weighted. Okay?
Thank you. Any other public comment? Okay, if not, we'll start with the agenda items. The first item is the reading program improvement proposal, Words Their Way. Mr. Sadowski.
Good evening, Matt Sadowski, K-5 supervisor. I am very excited today to bring you a program that's going to sort of finish our balanced literacy plan for our elementary school students. My predecessor, Stephanie Washington, stood up here before all of you and talked about the Being the Writer program, which is now implemented in all of our elementary schools, and Making Meaning, which will be is being piloted currently and will be fully implemented in 2 of our elementary schools, and then hopefully the year after in all 7 elementary schools. So there's a really critical piece that's currently missing, which is our phonics, our word work instruction. So there's really 2 basic theories of how you could implement word study into a classroom. So there's the whole language approach, which really it's taught almost fully in context through stories and writing. And then there's the phonics-based instruction, which is very isolated, where it's just taught those individual phonics skills. So one thing that I particularly like about Words Their Way is that it sort of is balanced and takes both approaches and sort of meshes them together to be what's best for our students, our youngest students learning their how to spell. So I have a unique perspective of the fact that I was one of the 21 pilot teachers in our district that is piloting this. We have teachers in 1st through 5th grade that are piloting it amongst 5 of our elementary schools currently. So I can speak very clearly about what I noticed between my students. So before we even get into sort of how this program works, I can say that with Reading Street, the kids would go home and they would practice their 10 spelling words. They would come back a week later, they would write their 10 spelling words correctly as a dictation. 5 minutes later, they'd be writing a story, they'd be writing in any class, and it would be spelled completely wrong. That exact same word, 5 minutes ago, they spelled correctly on a test. So the philosophy of words their way is a little bit different. We're not asking kids to memorize. In fact, that's something that the program says is completely against their philosophies. We're not asking our kids to memorize. We're asking our kids to look at spelling patterns when we're talking about encoding and decoding, and really think about what are the rules that we're learning. So they go home and they practice that through a sort, which we're going to talk about in a minute. They come back, and their test, their assessment is not these 10 spelling words that were just part of their list. It's words that have that same skill, but we're assessing are they able to apply the skill or apply that spelling rule to other words. So the way that this program is designed is through a series of sorts. Let me see if I can get this to go down. Yes, perfect. Okay, so it's through a series of sorts. So one thing that we want to talk about, and Dr. Scheid mentioned this a little bit before in technology, that our brains really do need that multisensory approach. We can't just hear it, we can't just see it. We also have to be touching it, and we have to be moving it, and that's truly how kids learn, probably how we learn, honestly, as adults. So this program is through a series of sorts. So the kids will get actual sorts that they can manipulate with their hands. Some examples of these sorts at our youngest age, we may be looking at word families. So you may be looking at the at and the at word family. So they may have the word cat, and they might have the word nap. And they have to decide, okay, well, cat, that's going to be part of the at family. That doesn't mean that on their test, we don't expect them to also know how to spell hat. In some of our older ages, this is one of my favorites, looking at able and able. Well, able are words that can stand alone, and we can add able to it, like breakable, breakable. But able is not. Possible is an example. Pos is not a word. So when you learn that, yes, that's great that now maybe you can spell and read breakable and possible, but there's so many other words. When you're thinking, wait, as an adult, there's times I have to stop and think, wait, is it able or able? Well, I know this rule, so now I can figure it out pretty easily. So that sort of shows you the gamut of your primary students to your upper elementary students. One of the things I like about this is if you look at any research, it really does tell you that just because a kid's in second grade doesn't mean that there needs to be a second grade list, that these are the words that they're working on. Reading Street, from my experience, has a very narrow approach. Your middle of the road kids, they're learning some words. It does nothing to extend for your high kids or really to remediate. So even though this program has 6 different levels, 6 different books. And yes, we can look and say, well, third grade, this is the typical book, but it's really not designed like that. Okay, so what happens is at the beginning of the year, the kids are given a spelling inventory. And once you score it, it's a little formula, and once you score it, it comes up with where this kid fits within these 6 books. So we'll talk a little about the cost later, but the kids will get that book, and that will become their sort. So within a classroom, you may have typically about 3 different groups going on in your classroom. So we're meeting their word study at their individual level, which is really important. That's how kids are going to learn and feel most successful, and also push them to succeed. I can tell you from my own experience that one of the great things about this is I'm seeing that connection. You know, they're spelling it right on their assessment, they're spelling it right 5 minutes later. But it's great as an educator because maybe I'm trained to sort of see some of those little nuances of kids picking things up, but parents at conferences were coming in and saying, wow, this is not something they've seen with their older children who have maybe gone through, I taught first grade, but have gone through the school. So the parents are also noticing that this is changing. And it's a different, it's a different philosophy for our parents because they were just like me. We learned 10 spelling words, went home, studied them, and came back. So they also are experiencing the new philosophy. So let me get back into the sorts. So they get these sorts, and throughout the week, they have different opportunities to sort, whether it's a writing sort, they do word hunts, so they're seeing that connection within books. So these are all things that the kids are asked to do during the week. So I'm going to go to the next slide. So right here, whoops, let me go back. So I'm gonna go slowly through it, but you have it. These are the different, there's 6 different books, starting with emergent and early letter names. Go to the next part, I apologize. All the way down to syllables and affixes and derivational relations, which is where I got that able and able from. So I talked a little bit about evaluation. So we want to make sure that our kids are clearly progressing, and data is going to tell us that this program is working, and we are seeing that through our data. So weekly, teachers are able to give, or weekly or bi-weekly, a small assessment, like I said, that's not just based on these 10 words, it's based on these skills. So the teachers are able to see weekly or bi-weekly that kids are making progress, and what's great about the book is it says, okay, if the kids aren't doing well on this particular sort, go back and review sorts 4, 3, 4, 10, and 12, whatever that may look like. 3 times a year, they're gonna take that spelling inventory. So in January, we're gonna ask our pilot teachers to again administer this spelling inventory. And we're gonna be able to see that the kids are making progress. It's so many points. So if they scored 40 points in September, they're showing 60 points now, they're showing growth. So that's really important. And this will be something that will happen as we push this program out. To collect that data, but also to make sure for classroom teachers that we're making sound decisions for our students. So that's a little bit about the assessment piece. So I'm going to go into the costs and then answer any questions that you have. So before I even go to the next slide, I want to tell you that this is a 6-year program. What I'm presenting to you for today, we are not going to come back to you for any more costs in the next 6 years. So when you look at this cost, and we're going to talk about the breakdown, when you look at this cost, this is just for 6 years. So that's important to look at. So we have a proposal. Right now, we're looking at rolling this out to just 2 schools next year, which would be Sellersville and West Rock Hill, along with our 21 pilot teachers, because we don't want to give the materials and take it away and say, oh, hold off a year, we'll give it back to you in a year. We really thought about what was the best way to roll this out. Do we want to go 7 elementary schools? Do we want to go to the 5 elementary schools that are not going to be using Making Meaning next year? Well, we really thought about it. There was 2 critical pieces to our decision and our proposal to go with these 2 schools. One is the fact that we need to have this whole balanced approach to literacy and not do piecemeal. So next year, West Rock Hill and Sellersville will have complete implementation of Making Meaning, being a writer, and this would sort of close that gap. This would end the balanced literacy program. So we want to make sure that those teachers have all the necessary components to have a balanced literacy program. The concern about bringing it to one of the other 5 schools is that it's very piecemeal. They're still doing pieces of Reading Street. So an example would be, at least in 1st grade, the Reading Street tests, the way to assess our students, their comprehension piece, well, they have to know the Reading Street's phonics skill. So if we were to ask them to do this program, this is replacement instruction for Reading Street phonics. So then we're asking the teachers to create new assessments, or there's just no way to monitor those kids' comprehension skills because they don't know those phonics skills that are based in Reading Street. So this is going to be a way to get that whole approach. Again, 2 years or 2021 school year, we would be looking to bring this full this year. So that's the plan. So when you look at this cost of about $91,000, that is the cost of student books. Again, this is renewable for 6 years, so we're not going to be saying 2 years from now, we need to keep adding this to our budget. That's not the case. This is for 6 years. They do have an online license. That's really good for that home piece if parents wanted that option. They wanted that option to do at home. But again, in the classroom, when we talked about that multi-sensory piece, the kids need to be touching those sorts. They need to be doing it. That's just how kids learn. Professional development, the reason that it says 0, they are going to implement, they're going to give us for free a 6-hour, 3 hours primary, 3 hours secondary, a free implementation of professional development. What's great about this program and doing it amongst the 5 schools with these 21 teachers is they can be great resources for us as turnkey trainers the following year. They're the ones who are entrenched in the program right now, so they can also provide additional professional development beyond what this 6-hour course would give us. So at this point, I'm open to any questions.
Can you back up a second when you talked about rolling this out piecemeal with keeping Reading Street? You lost me a little bit. So it seems to me that we are keeping it piecemeal by keeping Reading Street. Are you saying that you want to roll out making meaning and words their way at the same time, and that's what you meant by it being piecemeal, if we did one or the other as opposed to doing both at the same time, is that what you meant?
Yes, and I apologize for that, yes.
Okay.
So, in our two elementary schools, West Rock and Sellersville, next year, they are gonna have being a writer, making meaning over, right? So we're gonna add words their way. If we didn't, we would be piecemealing it with Reading Street. The same thing would go with your other 5 schools. They don't have making meaning and being, oh, they have being a writer. They won't have making meaning for another year. So we would be adding words their way, which is the phonics piece, and asking them still to do Reading Street with comprehension. They just don't mesh very well.
And Sellersville and West Rock Hill have all 3, or next year they'll have all 3?
They will have all 3 next year.
Because this is for them, is what you're saying?
Yes. Our
So
plan,
so they did it piecemeal this year, is what you're saying?
they're not doing words their way this year. So their phonics piece is through Reading Street.
So did they have to create all of those assessments to do that?
No, they can still do the Reading Street assessments because they're teaching the phonics piece through Reading Street.
Okay.
Sure.
Had we looked at, so you're saying that, how much of this, the 6-year license cost per year, the 15,000, so you're saying every 6 years, that's the cost that we would continue to pay every 6 years? Can you, did you look at the cost for purchasing across the board for all of our schools? Does it,
I have that.
is it proportionally the same, or is it less expensive to do that all at once?
It's not. And the concern is, if we were to go ahead and purchase this for the entire district next year, we would have 5 of our schools losing a year of that
Right.
license because it would just be sitting there. And in 6 years, we're still gonna have to renew it.
Because they're not gonna be able to do it.
Because they're not doing it.
I understand what you're saying.
Right. So yes, it is proportional, and I have that cost if you wanted it.
If you.
Yep, I do, I have it right here. So it's about 200,000, $206,117.
Is that for all?
That would be if we were to go ahead and buy it for all 7 elementary schools, currently.
So instead of the like 92,000.
Correct. That's just if we were to go ahead and buy this next year for Sellersville and West Rock.
And the 21, yes, 21 pilots.
And the 21 pilot teachers, yes, I apologize, yes. Yes.
He's got it.
So the $200,000 number that you just quoted is for the other 5, or it would be for all 7?
All 7.
That does not seem proportional then in
Right.
terms
It's not at
of.
all.
I mean, we're still factoring in the loss of a year, but if 2 schools are 92,000, then 7 schools can't be 200,000 if it's proportional.
No, it actually is,
Ah.
if you
That's-
calculate it correctly.
If
you
Because
take
the
a year
21
off.
teachers are basically one more school.
That's correct. That's
Okay,
correct.
so it's the factoring out the 21
Effectively, we're
teachers.
Yes.
buying this for 3 schools,
Right,
although it's not specifically for 3 schools.
I understand.
And so it looks like it's very close to being
Okay.
proportional.
Okay, that makes sense. It's the
Yes.
21 pilot
It is,
teachers
and
that
they
is
would
not a
not-
school, but from a size standpoint, it is roughly.
Oh,
Okay, that
Right,
makes sense.
they would not be in the cost
Thank
the
you,
following year, so I'm glad that you said that.
You had talked about, at some point in the future, when you talked about the fact that you can see the growth and how much better that growth is than our former program, would it, at some point when you have, could we have a presentation on that shows what the growth rate is compared to what it was with the old program?
So I can answer part of that. 100%, once we have more data, we can certainly come back and show you that growth. I don't have a comparison to what it was in Reading Street because we're literally just taking 10 spelling words and they're spelling them. There was no spelling inventory, if that makes sense, so I don't know that I can go back and say, well, this compares to what the data was before, but I can certainly show you what the data is showing now.
But you had reading and writing assessments, so you could compare what the growth was from the beginning of the year to the end of the year with the old program to the new program, right? Could we do something like
I
that?
could certainly look into that, absolutely.
Okay, and then I just wanted to share a couple of experiences with my second grader,
Great.
in line with what you were talking about. As far as the sorts, I think what's one of the things that the students are doing is the teachers are leaving. It's not a scripted answer. The kids can sort them in different ways, and so the kids are being creative and finding their own ways to sort that are different from the examples that are given and learning that higher level of thinking. And then you know, when I was reading with my second grader, and she's trying to sound out words that she doesn't know, and she's using those rules, she knows rules that there are adults that don't know those rules, right? You know, I mean, there are adults that never learned that, they memorized, as you're saying, and so they didn't learn how to apply those to new words. And I can give you an example. We're reading words, and then you come to a word that ends with an E, right? And then she can't pronounce the word, and I said, well, what does the E do to the vowel, right? And so I'm saying it's going to make it the long vowel, and she says to me, oh, it makes it say its name, which is the way that they say the rule, right? So she already knew that rule, and then she applied it and she said the word. And so she's gotten so much better at it that now she does that herself, and I don't even need to ask the question, and she looks at it and she figures it out, and then she reads using those rules that she is remembering. So I can just see, you know, the difference between how quickly she's learning to figure out those other words when she's reading herself compared to even some teenagers who haven't picked up those rules that way. Because, you know, we touched on the rules before, but not in this way, right? You know, you learned it with the 10 spelling words, you learned this is what these words do, and then you never talked about it again. And so I just, you know, when you see the kids learning to do that on their own, it's really neat to see.
I just have a couple, did you?
Sorry. I just wanted to know, what's the prep like with materials? A lot of photocopying, initially a lot of photocopying and...
Shouldn't be a lot of photocopying because each grade has their own workbook.
Okay.
So they do the cutting again. It's not a waste of time. That is all part of their process. That's up to sensory piece.
Okay.
So the prep is minimal.
Okay.
So I just really have a couple of comments. I like the spelling method because it's kind of like, I like with my children to answer their questions with a question. Like, well, what do you think the answer is? How do you think that's spelled? So that to me, and I've had success with that just, so I hope that will be successful for the kids as well, because it, like Megan was saying, it makes you think, and I think that embeds it in your brain. But I'm no educational whatever wizard. And then I also like how the learning, I think if I understood what you said correctly, that it's tied to specific skills. You made some reference that said if they've gotten this incorrect, then you need to go back and address those. And from my previous experience, work experience, that's exactly how you move kids along very quickly to make them to gain reading levels is by or math levels, going back and going right to the skill instead of covering everything all over again. So those are two positive things that I see from it. So thank you.
The cost per year, 6-year license, the $15,000.
Yeah.
You did say that was what we would. The other costs you wouldn't repeat, right? So it's just the top cost. So because you get to 91 or 92, how do you get from the 15 to the 92?
So I broke it down a couple different ways for you to look at. So the 91,000,
Oh, that's what
almost
I'm
92,000 is your overall cost
Every year.
Okay.
for the 6 years.
15 times 6 is
For 2 schools.
And 21
Plus
teachers.
actually,
3 schools.
2 schools plus your 21 pilot teachers, so it is almost 3 schools.
Makes me giggle. That was the 21 pilots. What do you have? You should get them T-shirts.
Thank you very much.
They would love that.
yeah.
I can't wait to share that one. Yeah.
All right, good. Just give me 1 second. I wanna. Which one? Thank you, Mr.
Sure,
Sadowski.
thank you so much. Thank you.
Okay, so our next item is the program improvement for journalism, the honors book approval, and I do have a copy of the book here that Dr. Shai brought in if anybody wants to see it up close. And that's with Mr. Chico.
Well, once they learn how to spell and learn some words, they can take a journalism class in high school.
Please make
Last,
sure. Where they go into journalism.
last fall, we approved a move for us to take our existing journalism course, which was a half-year elective, general elective, and changed that to a full year honors level journalism course that also allowed the seniors that are going to take the course to make this their English requirement. And as a result, we so much, as I should say, Mrs. Gordienko, our journalism teacher, did a lot of work to revise the curriculum, to add vital components, to add a historical component and some other components, as well as adding in the idea that now, as opposed to the past, the journalism class would actually produce and publish the Pendulum, which was done via a club before. The club still exists, so kids still can contribute, but essentially the job of producing a paper on a more regular basis now is a part of the journalism class. As you can imagine, it requires some more resources, and that is where this book comes in. The current textbook resource that we have for the class focuses on reporting in the media, and it's basically a how-to guide. So how to conduct interviews, how to deal with multimedia, whether it's television or podcasts and things and other mediums like that. And it's pretty much a how-to. It's a good how-to. It presents a lot of information. It also comes with an AP style guide, and of course, as you can imagine, a lot of the stylistic and writing components are readily available online in various and sundry resources that are credible from universities and other journalistic organizations and publications. This particular book, The Elements of Journalism, by Kovach and Rosenstiel, offers the, I don't want to say more philosophical, but ethical concerns. It offers the how and why of journalism. So why is journalism important? Why is it important to have rules? What are ethics in journalism? What purpose does journalism serve? This book has a lot of discussions like that. But also practical applications as well, things that people could, that journalists or people interested in journalism would want to consider. But it also has a component for people who are not journalists, people like me and you who want to know what the responsibilities and obligations are of journalists and of the journalism profession. So it covers a lot of ground. Additionally, because the course now goes to an honors course, and it would be someone's English course, we wanted to make sure that we raise the level of rigor. This book is also written, it's a more complex text, so some of these readings students might take home, they might provoke discussion, they might provoke critical thinking, and other points of information that we thought would be necessary for this course. So that's why we'd like to propose this, is adding this to the course. We did consider some other texts. Most of the other texts were more specialized, so this text gives a broader. Sorry, I'm trying to click on. I have the Kindle version, so I'm trying to click on the table of contents. This text, talks about the idea of truth, who journalists work for, how to verify sources, and the independence of journalism, the duty of journalists to be a voice for the people, and so forth and so on, and all those journalistic concepts that are necessary. Again, these readings offer a higher level of rigor for our students. Some of the other resources that we considered were more specialized, so it would only focus on ethics, or it would only focus on certain components. This one was more broad-based, would give our students a lot more items to consider as they move forward in the course. And as you can see, the cost component, right now, by the way, we have 3 sections, so we based on what we have in front of us right now. The cost component came to, just find the actual, $960 for 80 copies. Generally, these would be kept in the classrooms, but students would take them home as needed for various reading assignments, or in-class assignments, whatever the case might be. And as you can imagine, this might be fodder for things like Socratic seminar discussions and things like that, where we want to talk about bigger issues in that class. One of the other items that we had discussed, Mrs. Gordienko and I had discussed, was it's a soft back, it's a paperback, which, as you can imagine from an economic point of view, is fabulous. And also from the point of view that there may be a new edition in 2 or 3 years. And if we decide to go with a textbook, a heavy hardback textbook, you're talking $80, $90, possibly $100 an issue. And, well, you get my point. So this is something that we could upgrade pretty easily and economically, and still serves our purposes along with the existing text. So, do you have any questions?
I have an off-topic question, so if anyone else has any on-topic questions first.
Well, it's sort of, I mean, it is a 2014 book, so I'm just sitting here thinking, you betcha you're gonna have it, you know.
Yeah, there was a runner-up called, put your glasses on, the Principles and Practices of Journalism, but that one had a lot of overlap with the existing text. So we'd be getting this much information that we would want, and then we'd get a lot of overlap information. Equally credible, good information, and it was a little bit more on the price point, but we feel this book best meets our needs.
Do we have any idea when to expect a new edition to come out, since it is?
I asked the, I spoke to the rep from the, and they really don't have an idea. That's, I guess in the model.
They're not working on it and planning on releasing it.
In their model, there's somewhere when they look for consumer demands. The good news about this is that these are the elements of journalism in like ethics and pieces like that. Things that don't necessarily have to be updated every 6 months or something like that. Philosophical concerns, the purpose of journalism, First Amendment. It pretty much stays stable. I think to update a book, you just want to give it new context, so you can get kids examples.
Yeah, just glance through the first or second chapter about the truth in journalism.
And it's again, we understand that even though we have 80 kids in this class, we're not going to probably not going to put out 80 journalists from the class of 2019 or 2020. But these skills, these writing skills, these skills of discernment and navigation and the other pieces that are essential, for every student.
Right,
That sits there.
for the consumption too.
Absolutely, as wise consumers as well of information.
And I can say that I've learned that they've updated this curriculum because I've already had 8 journalism interviews around topics from these students who are writing their research. And it's an interesting process because they have to do all of the research and develop their questions ahead of time, which means they're walking in with some level of expertise around the topic. And I've been all over the gamut in terms of the things that I've spoken with the students. And then they use interviews, and it's more than one. I've been one of their interviews of 2 or 3 people that they then incorporate our thoughts and their research into a final paper. So my only requirement for the 8 students was you must send me the final when it's done, because I want to see what it looks like. So I've received 2 of the 8 thus far, and it's a really fascinating topic in terms of the way they weave in what I say and what a teacher says and what their parents say, or whatever their 3 interview topics were around that as well as the research. The only other question I have, Dr. Scheid, is just to confirm that this is a budgeted amount, and that this is not over and above the program improvement budget, and this is part of the budget that was anticipated, so the money is sitting there for these.
Well, the focus was to build the program improvement proposal budget. It would, and at this point, we have one more program improvement proposal that actually Mr. Trubisky will be bringing in January, and we're being right for grade 6. The total, including that, is 286,676, which is actually below program improvement over the last at least 3 years.
Well done.
And I've heard that you can thank a specific teacher for all of your interviews, because after one student asked and got the answer of yes, the teacher shared that with everyone because the teacher was so excited that the superintendent said yes to an interview. So then all the kids knew, and all the kids were like, oh, I'm gonna go see him.
That's what I do.
Or some of them may have.
It's been wonderful to get to know some students.
So my kind of off the topic, somewhat off the topic question, other than it's a writing question, so it kind of applies. I've worked with a bunch of different high school kids, and I was a high school kid through here. So one of the skills that I'm not seeing consistently is kids knowing how to change the wording of their sentences so that they're not saying I throughout the whole entire paper. And I've seen that so consistently, and I know that I didn't really learn that skill during my time in high school. It wasn't until I was in college that I learned that skill. And I'm wondering, but it's a skill that you should have already, right?
Absolutely.
And so I'm just wondering, is there somewhere where we're making sure that we're building that into the curriculum, where we're teaching kids how to do that, where we're teaching them how to flip their sentences and reword them so that it's not starting with
It's,
the word?
yeah, it's not even, it's really, it's not a how question, it's a who question. It's who you're writing for. Who's your audience? And that's, and kids should be given the opportunity to write I. But they also need to understand that if they're writing an email to the superintendent to ask for his time, they probably need to be a little more formal with it. I mean, probably still use I, but it needs to sound a little more formal.
Well, I didn't mean they shouldn't use I at all, but when you have 10 sentences in a row that all start with I, to
Yes.
change it up, you know what I mean?
Yeah, and we've talked as a department about very specific techniques to change the structure of a sentence, so you're not maybe starting every sentence not only with I, but starting with any pronoun.
Right.
Or noun, starting a sentence, switch it around and try to start with something else, or positive phrase or something like that. So we have had those discussions, and as we look at building our curriculum over the next couple of years, writing is obviously going to play a major component, and the how-to of writing is certainly important to us.
Well, I'm putting in a special request for that skill.
No,
Is this an honors class?
Yeah.
Yeah, journalism is honors. Yeah.
Thank you.
And we won't tell anybody that Mr. Shaplicki, if you ask nicely, will take your college application essays and put his personal touch to them.
I'll give an overview as you were loading up the PowerPoint for me. If you remember, a month ago, we had a pretty significant presentation on class rank, GPA, and some grading topics specifically at the high school. There was a great level of agreement around many of the topics, but there was some feedback around some of the topics where there was some mixed feedback from that standpoint. So from a standpoint of where we were, at the end of that presentation in November 2018, here were the ideas moving forward. And so this was kind of the culmination of the end of the presentation, all of these items we had discussed, and suggested that in these areas, these were the areas that we were looking in terms of a recommendation and gathering feedback. There was feedback at that meeting from many of you. There was feedback from some board members after the meeting from a standpoint of email, as well as there was parent feedback both at that meeting, as well as there were 3 emails I've received between that meeting and basically a couple days afterwards. We were that week supposed to meet with the high school teachers and counselors. We got snowed out, so we then did that after the Thanksgiving break. We have had that meeting with the high school teachers and counselors to do the exact same presentation for them. So we didn't change the presentation for the teachers and the counselors because we wanted their feedback on the same information, although we did provide some of the feedback that had been given at this meeting and from the parents to see whether it did match where they were. We received feedback at that meeting, as well as I received 2 staff emails after the meeting to provide their feedback that they wanted to do it after they had reviewed some information. Around the level of where there was some conversation, it really had to do with 2 pieces. It had to do with class rank, and it had to do with the recognition of students specific to class rank, because obviously one does dovetail with the other. If the recommendation is to not do class rank, that then changes what the recognition looks like because it doesn't exist from a standpoint of being public and things like that. So where we are, the committee then met again to kind of take a look at that feedback, and we're suggesting that we stay consistent with the items that are in black. They are all the items that do not involve recognition and class rank, and that we are changing our recommendation to suggest that class rank change to be calculated off of the new GPA. And so currently there are 2 GPAs. There is the GPA that I would say is calculated using the weighted course average, and that is a pretty standard college, high school GPA, the way most people would calculate it using a weighted system. There then is the divisor that is utilized in Pennridge, specific to then recalculating the GPA, and that is how rank is determined. The recommendation is to do away with that divisor and to only have one cumulative GPA that is based off the weighted scale that would be used to calculate class rank. So students would continue to be ranked, but there would only be the one GPA that we are used to calling the weighted GPA that goes there. And then obviously if we're going to have rank, we will continue to recognize rank. And as I said at that meeting, the whole concept around recognition and what that looks like at graduation is a separate presentation for later in the school year, because those aren't things that are policy issues. These are things that are, some of these are policy issues that we will have to present to the policy committee in 2019. All right, so that is our suggestion in terms of what that looks like in terms of the changes. Everything else, which there was approval and support for, both in this setting as well as with the teachers, are the items that are still in black. I'm going to read them just to make sure you don't have any questions about them, but we had spoken about them a month ago. One is moving to a cum laude system. One is adding a plus or minus weighted grading system, so there will be B pluses and B minuses. Currently there are just Bs. So anywhere from an 80 to an 89 is all of the same from a GPA standpoint. We are suggesting moving away from that. Talked about awarding honors credits for some college courses. Currently college courses do not impact your GPA. You do get credit for them, but they do not impact your GPA calculation. They're like an audit course that some of you would be familiar with. We are suggesting that we use honors credit for college courses that are in content areas, and to use non-weighted courses for those that are elective. And so that would match with our departments here, and where we primarily have honors weighting and non-honors weighting in many of our elective courses. The inclusion of decile information for the graduating class on the school profile, that's simply to provide another level of communication, because as was mentioned tonight, 4.4 is not the same in every school district. And so it does at least allow to tell you within what decile range is 4.4 and where within that range does it fall. Obviously the class rank, we give you a specific number, but it does give you a sense for what our grading scale looks like. Obviously the continuation of a senior academic achievement event, which is already occurring in the spring, as well as then the policy recommendations that we're talking about. When we then took this slide and matched it to timeline recommendations, this is what the slide looked like in November in terms of the things that would be impacted for next year, as well as the things that would be impacted for current juniors as well as current freshmen. With the change in the recommendation, this is what it changes to. No suggested change in terms of for next year. The items listed in next year have equal impact. Some of them have no impact on students. They're just recognition items like cum laude. So for this year, cum laude, the decimal information as well as the policy information that will have to come in the spring. For next year, which means anyone who's a current junior or younger in the school system, that we move to the plus minus as well as the change to the college courses, that some be weighted, some not. And then for the current freshmen, would be the elimination of the divisor in calculating GPA, because that does truly change the rules for students. Ninth grade schedules are fairly similar in terms of the options for honors and the lack of options for AP. And so they are more alike than different in 10th, 11th, and especially 11th and 12th grade. There are lots of divergent paths in terms of weighted courses. And so the thought was to change that for the current freshmen. And then obviously the other two items were eliminated, and I just put it up there for a standpoint to say nothing would change from a class rank and recognition from that standpoint in terms of what that would look like. Are there any questions about the information that's up there? I'll just base it off of this slide because it's the same information that was changed from earlier. The only other piece of feedback that was discussed at this meeting last month was regarding tech school students. Tech school students currently benefit from the divisor because they routinely take more than 6 credits a year because they're a tech school. And so between what they're required to do to graduate in tech school, they routinely have 7 credits is common for tech school students. And so often their rank had been increased based on that divisor. And so there was some concern about this hurting tech school students. And so the question was, should some levels of tech school be weighted? should there be a weight awarded to year 3 or year 4, or both year 3 and year 4, or all the years in terms of that feedback. Dr. Scheid has begun a conversation with the administration at Tech School to get their feel. I'm also addressing it tomorrow with the other two